28 minutes past 8. Can't be serious.
Morning, thank you very much. The magic of the FA Cup has become a cliched phrase, but for clubs in the lower leagues of the football pyramid, the FA Cup provides a huge opportunity for sporting success and also for financial rewards. We can speak to the vice chairman of one of those clubs, Mark Barrett from Horsham FC. Morning, Mark.
Morning.
It's your club is in the 7th tier of English football, one of the lowest ranked clubs in this year's FA Cup first round replays. You drew 3-3 with Barnsley from League One. That is, I assume, one of the greatest achievements in the club's history before we even start talking about tonight.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're all a bit shocked still walking around, can't believe what happened really, but it was an absolutely fantastic night, superb performance from the boys and for the fans as well, and it's led to what is going to be a very exciting day today.
Yeah, an exciting day. Tonight is your first round FA Cup replay. It's also, I think, the first time that Horsham has been shown on terrestrial TV on ITV4 tonight. What extra interest has that generated?
I've never seen anything like it. We've been on television before a few years ago, but this, I think, has come back. It's really, the profile of the club's just exploded, really, and the excitement around the town is absolutely buzzing. You know, yellow and green scarves in shop windows, and pubs, I think, are sold out, showing the game to the people that couldn't get tickets. So it's going to be, it's going to be quite an occasion.
You have managed to squeeze some extra fans into the ground, haven't you? You've upped it by an extra 1,000 up to 3,000, is it, for tonight?
Yeah, we opened our stadium in 2019 and we had a capacity of 2,000, but we've managed to squeeze an extra 1,000 in. We had to work hard to logistically, obviously, put plans in place to get the extra supporters in.
Yeah, and considering you didn't have a permanent ground at one stage, you know, it's difficult to run clubs financially at the moment. You've been at this club for 30 years. How tough has it been given the current financial situation?
There's not a lot of money awash down in the lower leagues. We've community clubs, so we've got a business model around management, pitch, and obviously our clubhouse and things like that. And then we reach out to the community, around 100 families into every home Saturday league game, for instance, to get families involved. It's hard work, but we all enjoy it. We're volunteer based, and we're self-sufficient. That's all we have every year.
Yeah, I like to keep my ideas as well. Some of the players that work together and talk to them before they get to the ground.
Yeah, we've got a lot of teachers, so it's been quite difficult for them to get any time off at all, so they've got the teaching lessons this morning. We've got postmen, for instance, as well, and they've still got to do their day jobs, and then they'll sort of get to the ground hopefully by 5 or 6 o'clock tonight.
Yeah, it's difficult to change your range of different range as well. I think some of those stoppers will come with it. And the high forecast fee for tonight's game is £25,000. I know that's a small fraction of what you generally get in a year, but do you know what you're doing for money to get this game?
We'll just use it to keep everything in the club. That's what we're all about. It's just keeping the club moving forward. So you stand still, sort of stand still, bring the club backwards, so that'll help. We'll probably put in ground improvements so that we can get capacity up again over the next few years.
Well, good luck. Going to the second round of the FA Cup for the second time in your club's history. Mark Barrett, thanks very much for listening this morning. We're really nervous out of tonight. Good luck. Just quick word on facts, Mark. Quick word on tennis and men's Wimbledon champion Carlos Alcaraz lost on his debut at the Wimbledon final. Defeated in 3 sets by world number 7 Alexander Zverev. Racing tips this morning, Peter Jones 30, number 4 is Fun Lad, and Newcastle 250, number 4.
Hello, my guest today she's not looking terrible. Studying society
a flash of Sheldon's face in Geneva, that President Biden actually did not vote for him for Washington President Biden said he hoped for this increasing action when he shipwrecked for this rescue in Gaza. The Israeli army said Hamas has a command center under the building, and the police have denied.
Well
Reports
done.
say hospitals in England will struggle to provide thousands of extra beds to cope with demand this winter, after the Treasury rejected pleas for another £1 billion to cover the cost of strikes. The government says investment is already increasing the number of permanent beds by 5,000. Today is the King's 74th
哥哥，你係咪開到最
birthday.
大聲嗰個電話？
Ceremonial gun salutes.
嚇
The King will
我次次
declare
用完之後，跟住
national
個電話開到最大
emergency.
最大
His
聲。
birthday plans
有冇開到最大聲？
to help people facing food poverty and
主要咁大聲咩？
for NHS nurses and midwives. Lisa, thank you very much. It's 25 to 9. Let's turn to an update from Gaza. But the state of communications, it has proved difficult even to reach UN officials online for the usable. But we have just spoken to Thomas White, who's the head of UNRWA, the UN agency for Palestinian refugees. He says that overall they're getting 45 trucks a day of supplies in from Egypt. No fuel is within that, and they say 150 trucks a day is what they need to meet their minimum requirements. He says the situation in northern Gaza is brutal and it is compounding problems in the south.
Staff who actually got money were saying, well, it's no good having money because there's no food left on the shelves in the shops. So they're forced to queue up for bread, find fresh water, and over half of them are actually living in IDP shelters themselves.
And can you help us understand what is happening around the hospitals in the northern part of Gaza? Let's start with Al-Shifa and the acute problem with the babies who have been in incubators for which there's no longer fuel. The Israeli military is now saying that they will bring incubators in from Israel into Gaza. Can you see that working?
We are very aware that the situation in the hospitals is very acute. I was up there last week and the situation was dire in a number of the hospitals. And as I understand, it's got worse over the last few days.
Are there safe corridors that are operating? Again, that's something which Israel says they exist, that there are safe routes to safer places. And then people in Al-Shifa say it is not simple to go outside their hospital compound.
I think for a lot of people in the north, they've made the decision that now is the time to move south. It was a very perilous journey, moving out through areas where there was ongoing fighting, to then effectively cross the front line into an Israeli-controlled zone just north of Wadi Gaza. There was fighting and numerous sort of mortar attacks around this route along the sort of main north-south road, Salahuddin Road. So a very harrowing journey for people who made it south. And of course, they get south of Wadi Gaza, and you could literally see them sit on the side of the road, sigh of relief, a sense of relief that they were out of a very active conflict zone. But then, of course, the question is, what next? I've arrived with a plastic bag full of belongings, and I now need to find shelter somewhere. What does the future hold for me? So a lot of emotions for the people leaving the north.
What are those people eating? What is the food that you are able to provide? I know not everyone in Gaza is registered as a refugee that comes under your remit, but what's your sense of the food situation?
About a month ago, we made the decision to serve all Gazans. As the largest UN agency, we've already had a food operation that was supporting 1.2 million people. We basically just extended the scope of the assistance. We're serving all Gazans now. Essentially what we are doing is providing wheat flour. Very luckily we had a large stock pre-war for our regular food program, so essentially over the last couple of weeks we've drawn on that. I usually get flour to bakeries, and in the last week and a half we've started delivering directly to families. This is because bakeries are running out of fuel and cooking gas. So essentially if you drive around the streets now, the old Tamoon, the flat ovens are all out, and people are burning firewood and cooking sort of flatbread on top of these Tamoon ovens.
And water, what's the position?
In our shelters, we can only provide 2 litres of potable or drinking water per day. The minimum international standards in a humanitarian context are 3 litres. We have been providing fuel to about 60 water wells for pumping groundwater for drinking and also for two major desalination plants. Unfortunately, in the next 24, 48 hours, those pumps and those plants will cease to operate because we're running out of fuel. Yesterday, we stopped the water operation for 200,000 people because our trucks ran out of fuel. It was a distribution operation. We also announced yesterday that our ability to pick up trucks, aid trucks at the border, has stopped because our semi-trailer fleet.
Well, life is horrendous. I think that everyone should work towards. That's my understanding of it. I think it's very easy to take side. It's very easy to look at it as a football game, but in the end, I think each of us should spend walking a while in each other's shoes, people on both sides, and then how do we go towards it?
There are moments where a few words capture what could be easy. Don't see children whose conception sperm could only find their biological origins after 18 years old. But in an era of widespread use of DNA testing and social media, more and more are trying to find their biological parents. You've heard of this spoken before from Louise McLaughlin, who documented her search for her biological father on the podcast You Look Like Me. She told us recently why she felt she should have been able to learn his identity before she turned 18.
I found out when I was 13, and that felt like the rug absolutely then pulled out from underneath me. There's been a lot of conversation around this in recent years. There's been studies, and donor people who fare best with this information are the ones who are told from day one. And that can be done in an age-appropriate way. It doesn't need to be sitting down and going, okay, the mother's not the mother, the father's not the father. That's not the conversation that we're talking about. But we do have the right to know, and there shouldn't be an age limit on being able to know where we come from. The age of 18 just to me seems quite arbitrary.
Well, it looks like Louise has got the support now of the body that's in charge of all of this, the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority, which is the of the HFEA. Morning. Let's begin with why you think there may be a change. So I think it's captured very well in that clip. Social and technological factors have really overtaken the law. So when the HFEA Act first came in 1990, first sort of law of its kind in the world, the presumption was about anonymity. Over time, professional advice was very much that children should know, as was just said, and so the law was changed in 2005, whereby donor-conceived individuals when they reached 18 could write to us at the HFEA and we could tell them information, identifiable information about their donor. But since 2005, there's been a huge explosion in sharing information on social media and in these cheap DNA testing services, such that really people are now finding out by other means, and it doesn't help the law at all to be constantly subverted. So the change you're recommending is what and how will it work? We think what should happen is that the parents of the donor-conceived individual should be able to apply to us shortly after the birth of their child for identifiable information about their donor. So there's no compulsion in this, it's very much a decision. And indeed they could write to us at any period between the birth of the child and when the child becomes 18. But crucially, the child wouldn't have a right to know. It would be up to their parents. That's right, and particularly in the early stages. So I think it's a common feature of English law, whereby, if you like, parents make decisions on behalf of their children. But as the child grows older, it's also a common feature that parents are supposed to pay particular attention to the views of their children. And so we would expect that, say, when the child is perhaps 10 or 12 or 14 or something or other, any application from parents should include evidence to suggest that the child themselves is happy to have this information. But what if it's the other way around, which is the parents do know, but for some reason they don't want to tell their child, and the child desperately does want to know in the way that Louise did? Well, I think there are real difficulties there, because the law, it's very difficult for the law to extend into private family relationships. None of us know what goes on inside of a family. And the problem we have is that until an individual becomes 18, it's very difficult to imagine they have a particular right to get information from an official body. So you're right, it does depend on parents having those conversations with their children. But I think there's lots of evidence that that's now happening in a way that it didn't many years ago.
And do you have any concern that there might be people listening who think, well, I'm not going to debate it until we know that?
Well, if history's any guide, probably not. So when the law changed in 2005, there was a lot of concern that the number of donors would drop. They did drop immediately. They're built back up and are now stronger. And in fact, if you like, the sorts of people who donate have changed over time. So I don't think that's a major concern.
Peter Thompson, Chief Executive of the
Thank you.
It's 10 to 9. David Holmes was a teenage gymnast when he was asked to become the main stunt double for Daniel Radcliffe in the Harry Potter films. He was a little older than the child star and they became friends. They have remained so through the decade they worked together and afterwards. Since the terrible day when David had an accident during rehearsals for the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and broke his neck. He is paralysed from the chest downwards and his story is the subject of a new Sky documentary. Liza Mazimba has been speaking both to him and to Daniel Radcliffe.
My first day's work was being the world's first Quidditch player. We put a broomstick on the back of a truck and drove it down the runway at Leeson Studios with Chris Columbus looking down a camera lens, whooping and hollering, saying, yes, I think this is how we're going to do Quidditch.
The teenage David Holmes became Daniel Radcliffe's stand-in for the movies, doing stunts deemed too risky for the film's young star. But in 2009, while rehearsing for the second film, David was badly injured and permanently paralysed from the chest downwards. He's now the subject of a documentary about his life after the accident.
I've had a lot of patience, but I still am able to see the future.
The documentary details how he's found such positivity, thanks to his strong personality and the close group of friends surrounding him, a group that includes Daniel Radcliffe.
He was like my little brother in the film, and then he grew to be one of my best friends. And then we still talk. It's me sending him stuff for in movies when he plays or making plays for the wedding. Just joy to me and I love it.
Daniel Radcliffe says the sound
something that was so amazing for us to hang out with, one of the best as I watch, but being like a real guide to me and more to look out for him and
There is a scene in the latest documentary series about another celebrity, Robbie Williams, who comes on the 20th anniversary of his solo career. And June last year, the Robbie's Club was a huge one.
It's brilliant training, kind of like an illness, which just comes to isolate you and makes you feel weird. And if you're somebody like me with my particular mindset, I've never thought of God deserve any of those. So, extreme pain with everything that happens outside of your own body, which becomes to get you behaving in a certain way, makes you feel a certain way.
So do those cement documentaries like Disney on Netflix show us a real person, not the celebrity, just a person. Director of Robbie Williams and also directed a couple of others, those comparative ones across the documentaries too, and also to Sarah Dieter, who's subtitled Dr. Boyd. So Joe, first of all, tell us what the rules are, because many people watching will assume you are talking about care or film and what star actually writing.
Well, a lot of times that is the case, but I think you're going to go into this is I have nothing else to do with presentation. So I hope that everyone sees that way. It's often that is the case. Yes, they said another celebrity documentary. What matters is he wants to tell a bigger story, a wider story, a story that opens up conversation and others like to do that.
So you've got control of the cutting room. I don't say this as a criticism, because I think it makes it stop producing or someone who watches it. Clearly, there are rules of playing the camera, which they can say, look, I don't want to look.
That can happen, but nothing's ever off limits, and that's kind of when you put the camera down so you get better stuff later in the day. So it's less about not talking about something, it's going to come back to it, and I'm not the type of person to avoid topic, so I'm going to return to it regardless, and I think that's always the attitude.
So you feel you end up with the person, not like a celebrity. I think you can convey that to the public.
100%, 100%, and I think I've proven that in all of my films.
Sarah Dieter, what do you think?
I think these documentaries are so interesting because they really show where we are in terms of celebrity power at the moment, and I love those documentaries. I think that the Robbie one is like particularly an exceptional piece of work. But we've obviously come through a period, basically the noughties, when celebrities were really on the sharp end of coverage and didn't have a lot of power or control over the way they were presented. And because of social media, because of the rise of streaming services, we've come back to a situation where basically access is king, and celebrities can make these choices about how they want to be seen and who they want to see them. And I mean, I was trying to kind of tick off how many of them these kinds of documentaries there have been. I basically ran out and had fingers and toes and the list. It's a huge number of things.
Sarah, you praise Joe's work, but when you're watching generally as a critic, but also watching the telly, do you find yourself thinking, well, that's a bit of the story, but it's not the whole thing?
Well, certainly in some cases that's true, and I know there's been some details in the Beckham documentary that have been pulled out for playing a tiny bit part in these factual records. But the thing is, what you see in these documentaries often is how a celebrity would like to be seen, but that can be as revealing as, like as spying on the paparazzi. What somebody wants you to know about themselves is a kind of truth about who they are. And it's not necessarily the most fascinating thing. I mean, there's been a whole range of documentaries to Robbie Williams and the way he appears in this documentary. Some people find it very sympathetic. Some people are sort of appalled that he's, flopping around in his pants, being sad about having achieved incredible success, which isn't necessarily a fair reaction to have. But he's put himself out there and made himself vulnerable to all these reactions by trying to show a true version of himself.
That's the fascinating thing about him, isn't it, Joe? I mean, he said to us, I'm just Rob from Stoke, isn't he, about to play Port Vale Stadium. That's the sort of essence of it, isn't it?
Totally. He's a very normal, everyday guy. He's been 16 years old, propelled into a world that no one could possibly be prepared for. Never mind losing out on all the formative years that you have to develop and become a human being. So, he talks about it in the doc. He talks about it in exclusively so much, when a universe is created around you and you're the center of that, what kind of person do you become? And that is what celebrity life becomes. Whether or not an industry can impact that
that or change that. I don't know. I'm not here to say that. But the reality is, these kids are having dreams and they're allowed to fulfill them.
And
it
final quick
really
word to
hurts.
Sarah, if I could, which is sometimes a fascinating detail to learn. Isn't it? On Beckham, we know that he didn't want to talk about his alleged affair. But he's got OCD and he cleans his barbecue all night, every night. I mean, I learned more about that than quite a lot else, I think.
Yeah, those kind of details. I think that they're also really important from the cynical celebrity point of view. That kind of thing humanises them and gives them a sympathetic backstory.
Well,
So
we've got to leave
you
it there.
always replay.
Lots of them you can watch. Robbie Williams is on Netflix at the moment, and many others. Sarah Deaton. Joe Feldman, director of Robbie Williams. Thank you very much.
That is it from us. Our editors today were Kirby Patton and Victoria Gardner. The studio director was Shona O'Donoghue. After the news, Jamal Khalidi will have the Life Scientific with Professor Sarah Harper, who's an expert on aging. From all of us, good morning. BBC News at 9 o'clock. Lord Cameron will take his place at the Cabinet table for the first time in 7 years this morning, the day after his surprise return to government. Rishi Sunak's appointment of the former Prime Minister as his new Foreign Secretary hasn't been welcomed across the party. One backbencher, Dame Andrea Jenkins, has already submitted a letter of no confidence in Mr Sunak's leadership. The new Tory party chairman, Richard Holden, said the Conservatives were a broad church.
We want all parts of the centre-right in British politics to be represented, and that means, it's the nature of our democracy. What we don't do is have small splinter parties ahead of a general election and then a deal cooked up behind the scenes. What you see is a broad church Conservative Party with a common goal, united together in what it is deciding to put forward to the country.
President Biden has called for Gaza's hospitals to be protected with fierce fighting surrounding one major unit of Shifa and worsening conditions for patients. Israel says Hamas has hidden a base underneath the building, but medical staff deny this. The latest figures show pay growth slowed down in the 3 months to September. The Office for National Statistics says average wages, excluding bonuses, rose by 7.7% compared with the same period a year ago, down from 7.9% in the previous quarter. One of the killers of James Bolger will face a parole board hearing today to discuss his possible release. John Venables was 10 when he murdered the 2-year-old in Merseyside in 1993. He spent 8 years in jail before he was released on licence, but was imprisoned again in 2017 after child abuse images were found on his computer. The Met Office is warning that a week's worth of rain could fall in just a few hours across parts of the UK this morning as the tail of Storm Debbie clears eastwards. 15 to 20 millimetres or more than half an inch of rain is expected in areas in southern England. BBC News.
Coming up here on BBC Radio 4, we hear the case for why scientists and artists should work together to help us avoid the dystopias we fear and make a future we actually want to live in. That's in 1 to 1, it's at 9:30. Then in our book of the week, while the Japanese are partly responsible for the spread of cuteness around the globe. Today's episode, Irresistible, how cuteness wired our brains and conquered the world. It's all for today. Now on Radio 4, Professor Jamal Khalidi hears how societies around the world are changing as more of us live longer and have fewer children in the Life Scientific.
Hello, my guest today began thinking about aging and retirement when she was still in her 20s. Not because she was about to stop working, quite the contrary. She was at the beginning of what would become her life's work, to understand the ways in which our increasing life expectancy was changing the world. Professor Sarah Harper runs the Institute of Population Aging at Oxford University and is a global authority on how healthcare, housing, infrastructure, migration, almost all aspects of society will need to adapt to us living for longer. Society changes also affect how many babies are born, and we'll be hearing how Sarah leads studies that explore people's attitudes to having children and why, in many parts of the world, the number of babies being born is changing dramatically. Sarah Harper, welcome to Life Scientific. I want to start with a myth that you quote at the beginning of your book, How Population Change Will Transform the World, which claims the world's population is growing exponentially and out of control, and the reason is that too many women are bearing too many children. Why did you begin with that?
I began with that because that was the belief that was around for a lot of the second half of the 20th having population aging, which was being driven by reductions in childbearing. So what we call the total fertility rate, which is the number of children that are born per woman of reproductive age, was consistently going down, first of all in Europe and North America, and then it was spreading out into Asia and Latin America, so that only sub-Saharan Africa still has very high rates of childbearing. And because of that, world population isn't going to reach 24 billion, which is what we once feared. The UN believes that by about 2050 we will hit probably 9 or 10 billion, and then we will probably flatten, maybe go up a little by the end of the century. But basically we are looking at a far smaller population than we once thought.
And why do falls in fertility happen?
If you give women access to family planning, and you improve their health and the health of their children, so that every baby who is born has a chance of living rather than dying. And fundamentally, if you educate girls, that means that you keep them in school for longer, you give them skills and tasks so they don't just think of becoming mothers, but also you empower them to choose the number of children they want. Then in most countries of the world, women will choose fewer children and are enabled to have fewer children.
Of course, at the same time as fewer children being born, we are living longer, as you say. As soon as 2050, the world will have the same number of people over 60 as there are young people under 50.
Yes, that's quite an amazing statistic. But, so remember what we're talking about is fewer children being born, and we're living longer. So generations will just simply replace themselves. But it will change the world, because we have grown up with the idea that you have lots of young people being born and coming into our societies and energizing them and working. And when you have over half your population aged over 50, and we will soon see that in some European countries, that changes the whole dynamic of society.
Let me take you back to your younger days, Sarah Harper. You were born in Twickenham, but your family moved soon after to the Chilterns, between Oxford and London. I gather your mother would regularly take you and your sisters out on nature walks.
That's right. So her father, my grandfather, was a horticulturist, so she had grown up just surrounded by plants and the natural environment, and I think we absorbed a huge amount of knowledge from her. My father was a little different. He was quite quiet, but he loved books and music. He loved the theatre, and I think what was really important was that I learnt so much from my parents, because I went to a very, very small convent school. The nuns very much thought if you did get a job, it would be one of service, so you might become a teacher or a nurse.
If you didn't just get married.
If you didn't just get married. Yeah. And as a consequence, the level of education I got was actually pretty poor. But I had all this opportunity
Thank goodness you had the stuff at home.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And hearing you talk about your nature walks with your mother sounds like, biology in the natural world would have been the obvious choice for you, but you actually went to Cambridge and studied anthropology.
I did, and you're right. I mean, when I was little, I think if anyone had asked me, I thought I'd be a biologist. But in fact, I can remember exactly what happened. We had an old girl who came back to the school, and I was about 12 or 13, and she had left school.
Their owner is still alive and well. Also this week, why we need more laws in outer space. We begin with protest. Not so much demonstrations and violence we saw over the weekend, but the sort of protests that lead to property being damaged, buildings sprayed with paint or dyed, a statue being torn down, and so on. Demonstrators have been put on trial for criminal damage, and that in turn has led to secondary protests of a different nature. We spoke to this man outside a Crown Court in London.
I'm Clive, I'm here with Defend Our Juries. We've just finished a protest outside Isleworth Crown Court. So the format for the protest is that we have people who are sat down, looking downwards with no eye contact.
These protesters are holding signs with words copied from a commemorative plaque on the wall of the Central Criminal Court in London.
They either have the original wording from the Old Bailey, a jury has the right to acquit according to their convictions, or they have a modern version of that. And today we've also had people who've had blank signs. So the plaque at the Old Bailey, this goes back to the Bushell case, 1670, when a judge, initially he locked up overnight the jury, and then he locked them up until they paid the fine, because they didn't give the verdict that he wanted. Another judge looked at this and said, no, this is completely wrong. And he established in law that a jury has the right to pass whatever verdict they want. you listen to the facts in the case, but the other factor that the jury brings in is humanity, and it's something that only the jury can bring in. Is it lawful for a contestant or that science like to use the law as a ground to contempt of court, usually in the form of the administration of justice? Well, that's something the courts are going to decide themselves, so can't speculate. But what we can discuss is whether a jury has the absolute right to acquit the defendant regardless of the evidence. Richard Vogler is Professor of Comparative Criminal Law and Criminal Justice at the University of Sussex. He too remembers Bushell's case.
A couple of radical preachers, William Penn and William Booth, had been forced out of their place of worship by the Conventicles Act and forced to hold an outdoor meeting which was considered to be an unlawful assembly by the government, and they were prosecuted, and the judge directed the jury that this clearly was an unlawful assembly and they should convict. The jury felt sympathy for Penn and Mead and said no, they didn't want to convict, and was duly locked up by the judge and had to be freed on habeas corpus sometime afterwards. That decision in Bushell's case established the principle which we can see recorded and celebrated on the walls of the Old Bailey, where there's a plaque which says Justice Vaughan delivered the opinion of the court, which established the right of juries to give their verdict according to their convictions. It's, in my view, a hugely important decision which has had reverberations right through criminal law ever since.
A jury does have to return a verdict according to the evidence.
Well, that's correct, but they also have an overarching duty to do justice, and we have seen that in a number of recent cases where they have returned verdicts which have shocked a lot. In Monty's case, for example, in 1985, Monty was a civil servant who released details about the Falklands War and which contradicted the government view. The government was very cross about that and prosecuted under the Hidden Secrets Act. The jury felt that this information should be in the public domain and acquitted. I'm also thinking of the Palisades War case in 1996, where a group of protesters objected to the sale of warplanes to an oppressive regime that had used to attack protesters and damage the warplane quite extensively. The jury felt sympathy with those protesters and acquitted them, notwithstanding that they clearly caused criminal damage.
And then there was Extinction Rebellion.
Protesters for Extinction Rebellion were acquitted in 2021 because the jury, on Virginians, felt sympathy with their cause. They felt that these were legal acting ecology interested in preventing wars, and because the protesters in 2022 were also acquitted, it shows that there was support for these protests and that people felt sympathetic to them, and it shows that the jury acts as a common sense break on the criminal law, which allows ordinary people's voices to be heard. It's really to represent us all. They bring the views of ordinary people into the courtroom, and I think there are three very potent reasons for doing this. Firstly, because otherwise sensible rules sometimes, in particular cases, work with justice, and you may say, well, there's discretion in the system to prevent that happening, but sometimes that discretion doesn't work, and the jury to prevent that. It's a very safety valve, if you like, to have that jury decision at the end. Secondly, even democratic states which have government with a majority in Parliament can enact laws which are intensely unpopular, harsh and oppressive. And if they do that, then no jury can be forced to convict in those circumstances. And thirdly, all of us who work in big institutions know that rocking the boat, throwing the shores is a dangerous activity and can have personal repercussions for it. Juries are outsiders, and they can therefore act as circulators and preventing justice and persecution in ways that those who work in big institutions simply not able to do. And that's a hugely important and wonderful power which exists in the hands of juries and is one of the glories, in my view, of our common law system.
And is that the system which decides according to the evidence which you said to me at the jury must do?
It has to decide on all circumstances. The evidence
the person damaging the property honestly believes that that person will consent, then they have a defence.
We've seen a number of people charged with criminal damage after various types of protests, and they say that they've got a defence. What sort of defence might you have in those circumstances under the definition you've just explained?
Well, in the Colston case, there were three defences that were raised. One was that the defendants believed they would have the consent of the people of Bristol. The other defence was that they were using reasonable force to move the statue because they feared other criminality, because there was a protest and people were getting particularly upset and distressed. And the third defence was that their human rights, in order to protest, were being interfered with by them being prosecuted for moving the statue.
We've seen some cases where demonstrators, protesters have caused what looks like criminal damage and they've been found guilty, and other cases where they have persuaded the jury that they have a defence. What does this tell us about the state of the law?
Well, I think fortunately, because of the spate of cases, recently the Court of Appeal gave guidance on this. The guidance set out really first consideration is proportionality. So what is the actual damage that's been caused? Is it temporary damage? Is it minor damage? And therefore, is it proportionate to prosecute someone for damage that really is very minor? So that's the first thing that the Court of Appeal considered. Thereafter, if damage is caused when a protest is ongoing and there's a violent protest, or the damage is significant in a peaceful protest, the Court of Appeal has said that that would be proportionate to prosecuting those cases. So they've given guidance to the courts and to the police as to what is proportionate and what may not be proportionate.
If you're advising something like this, of what appears to be damage to a building, and they say, look, we're just doing this to protest, what advice do you give?
In law, that doesn't have a defence. You go to court, you wouldn't have a defence to run, because the defence are very specific and set out in law. And deliberately causing criminal damage to make a political point is not a defence.
Are we confident that the law enables justice to be done? Is there a feeling among some people that protesters are getting away with causing quite significant damage and disruption to people's lives, and they're able to come up with an excuse which isn't really valid?
That might be a concern, and in fact, that's why our juries on the trial members of the public who live relatively locally make those decisions, and they weigh up all of the evidence. They are directed in law by the judge, and then they put the evidence alongside the law, assess that, and then come up with their decision. And we abide by those.
What if the jury are suspected of taking the view that protesters have a good cause and therefore they shouldn't be convicted even though they have committed what most people would see as criminal damage because they're doing it for a greater good?
Judges won't allow protesters to use the courts to make a speech or put forward a point of view. Our courts of law are not courts of morals or ethics or political footballs. Courts of defendants entitled to give evidence and explain why they have behaved as they have, but they're not entitled to use it as a political platform.
And you don't think we're giving a green light to protesters to go along course and come to court afterwards and say, you know, I thought it was justified, you can see what we're all trying to achieve?
Well, I think the fact that we are seeing some cases end in conviction makes it clear that the system does work.
But there are times when the judge tells the jury there's no defence and the jury acquits.
Indeed, a jury might have been directed that there is no defence in law, but it's still a matter for the jury, and what we would call that is effectively a perverse verdict. But the reality is that we don't actually know why a jury has reached the decision they have. For centuries, we've had juries deliberating on cases, and from time to time they do deliver a verdict that we don't understand, but that doesn't mean it's the wrong verdict.
Come on, Action Casey. On Law in Action, we tried to boldly go where no programme has gone before. But Captain Kirk of the Starship Enterprise might have to go a lot less boldly these days. Unreasonable, but
benefiting from that in terms of the data we receive. Everyone thinks that they're saying and streaming, but also much more perhaps significant things.
McDonald's or
like precision
KFC
agriculture.
or
So
what else?
farmers in
Or Just or pizza.
know where the soil is more moist than other areas, so they don't mix their grains in the non-moist soil.
你睇下有啲咩？
Seed generation
我哋翻到屋企見下公公，跟住再出去。
backbone of our everyday lives with a hidden utility. And unless we take that potential, that technology and the ability
得我哋兩個啫嘛，哥哥。啊，可以買埋俾媽咪嘅。應該。唔知可唔可以買埋俾媽咪
Order for delivery or order for pickup?
No, not order yet. 你睇下有咩先啦。你睇下有啲咩食先啦。你可能要有話 order， 你 order 一件先，跟住就。
I don't have a choice.
哦，點解
I can only order for pickup.
？OK。啊？
I can only either order for pickup or order for delivery.
哦 ，pick up 咯，即係一件或者 pick up。pick up 即係一件啫喎。
Take away or dine in?
dine in 啦。我 actually take away 啊。
How does this space
Family piece 10 piece or
幾錢啊？有冇啲 21 pound? 21 pound or 22 pound even? No. 食唔起啊，哥哥。
Oh, there's another one that's about the same price as the law. Dog and butter.
太貴啊！
What about family piece? That's 6 pounds.
17 pound？ 你有冇嗰啲講 offer 嗰啲嘢哥？
I'm trying to find the offer, but only offers I can find is
regulated to a certain extent by the average space
Bargain bucket, done it? What's wrong with bargain bucket?
For example, damage is caused by one satellite crashing into the other, identify the owner of the culprit satellite, and establish the fault.
我睇唔到點講 which one 嘅，
Then, arguably,
有平有多啲嘢咯。
Do you want box meals?
啊？
I wasn't going for box
It's very complicated. You have two potential recourses, two potential states. If you're private,
office and rewards.
if you're private satellite that you crashed into, then you have no
Crazy megalots for 3 pounds 99.
So you'll have to depend on your own
咩？乜嘢啊？
Limited offer.
and then you
Gravy together.
有乜嘢啊？
Rachel O'Brien.
Limited offer.
裡面有乜嘢啊？哥，你
One piece of original chicken breast, mini fillet, and 2 holes, plus a regular gravy and it's all gravy.
even in today's geopolitical context,
What do you think?
divided
你中唔中意食啊？
Do you want the whole thing?
you can do the same, therefore, I would hope for basically. I feel
要問下，睇下媽咪食唔食？
it's because of the lack of
你睇下仲有冇其他 offer？ 得一個 offer。
2 hot wings for 99.
And how would this be?
呢個 offer 嚟嘅，仲有冇其他？
Christmas special.
係乜嘢
there's no and there's no
？Nothing.
any
Nothing.
It's just Christmas special.
3 wish
Christmas special 有啲乜嘢？
You can look.
an action
我而家睇唔到。
I'm gonna look. I'm going to say.
that factor, even if they can't agree on substances of international space law or updates to international space law, surely we can agree on at least a dispute resolution forum for these kinds of disputes.
Rachel O'Brady, a solicitor advocate at the Collision Law Firm. Back down to earth now, quite literally. Lucy Ankers is a young archaeology student at the University of Glasgow. Supervised by her lecturer and supported by senior PhD students, she and her fellow undergraduates are taking on their first field trip this summer to Glencoe in the Scottish Highlands. More than 40 members confirm that Donald was massacred by troops. Lucy has considered their site to be used as a summer
definition of falls under the Treasure Act. You don't have that here. We're very open to lots of things. We treasure provided it's historically significant. Treasure tribunals are interesting in terms of really come about the First World War period all the way back to the Stonehenge and the
And what does the law say about that sort of lost abandoned work?
Generally, a common law, if the appropriate participant in the loss taken to himself, risk is prosecuted for theft. Finders are expected to report their findings to the Treasury Tribunal, normally as reports within 1 month. Professional archaeologists will eventually give them a period, but members of public record detectives, etc., should be contacting the Treasury Tribunal and asking what to do next.
Can it be theft if it doesn't belong to anybody or anybody specific?
Well, the thing is, it does belong to somebody. It essentially belongs to the crown. And the heritage crown in Scotland was actually taken very seriously. And it was a successful prosecution last year with the Treasury Tribunal. It's not finders keepers. So if you're digging it up out of the ground and taking it away to a garage or the home or whatever, that is potentially an act of theft. So it's very serious.
Let's talk about this finding act treasure chest. I understand that because this was organised officially by the university, the finders not only have to give the treasure they find to the ground, but they don't receive reward for it. Is that right?
That's right. The treasury system is what sets up its two streams of station. One is professional archaeological assemblages in the part of an archaeological dig, and the second sort of stream is what are known as charge sites, where it's found by special specialists in public sector digging, and that latter system is the one that attracts rewards. The thinking being that archaeologists are paid to do their job, they're professionals, and I think if there was to be a reward system for all of that, it would become very, very expensive. With charge files, it's the museums that have to raise the money. If it's a local museum, it can be quite a big undertaking for that museum to raise that amount of money.
And some quite large rewards have been paid, haven't they?
One of our most significant treasure troves is found in gallery, which
collecting materials for silver and gold treasures, including an absolutely lovely gold bird-shaped pyramid buried in Gowrie around about 900 AD, around about the time of the Viking raids and the birth of Scotland and the later sort of fascinating period of history. And nothing like it has ever been found before, but I believe it's changing our understanding of how extensive the trade routes were in Scotland and in Scandinavia as a whole, as far as Asia. And that, particularly because the gold and silver items there, it's kinder a metal detector for the quality.
But this Yankee isn't in this. What do you do next?
Hopefully,
Yeah.
maybe big surprise, but I just think
Law in Action returns to Radio 4 in the producers of Law in Action were Alain Gregorius and Diane Richardson. New psychological horror series on BBC Radio 4.
It infects the human body by smuggling stolen inside new cells.
A frustrating infestation.
That was going to be good.
Known to have associated with the family of one of Stephen's killers must have been coached by Ray Adams or another officer, and this amounted to flagrant acts of attempting to pervert the course of justice. Mr. Adams once ran criminal intelligence for the Metropolitan Police and gave evidence at the public inquiry into the Stephen Lawrence murder. A lawyer for Stephen's family says he's shocked at the new revelations and now wants a full investigation. Ray Adams says he has asked the Met to look into the allegations about him. Health experts have recommended that all children in the UK should be given a chickenpox vaccine at ages 12 and 18 months. They say such a move would help to make the virus a problem of the past. Here's our medical editor, Curtis Walsh.
Chickenpox, or varicella, is a highly infectious disease. Most cases are mild, but some children develop complications, and in rare cases, it can cause swelling of the brain. The Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunization says the US, Germany, Canada and Australia all saw significant increases in the number of cases and hospital admissions after introducing the jab to children. The committee also wants a temporary catch-up program for older children. It will now be up to the government to take a final decision on whether to roll out the vaccine.
The boss of McDonald's UK operations has told MPs that 18 people have been sacked as a result of the BBC investigation, which uncovers hundreds of allegations of abuse. Workers as young as 17 said they've experienced toxic workplace culture at the fast food chain, where claims of sexual assault, racism and bullying were not taken seriously. Alistair McCall said some of the testimony had been truly horrific and very difficult to hear. The BBC says it's been contacted by 2 further complainants as part of an ongoing investigation into the conduct of Russell Brand, who was employed by the broadcaster. The comedian and presenter now faces a total of 5 complaints about his behaviour when he hosted BBC radio shows between 2006 and 2008. Russell Brand has strongly denied any wrongdoing. Ron, thank you. We are starting with the resignation letter of Fiona Brown, who Robert found 20 minutes ago. She said she'd have more to say in due course after her second yesterday. And yeah, she really is venting her anger. A lot more to say. It's a 3-page resignation letter. No other way of putting it, and it's an all-out attack on the competence, positioning, and integrity of the Prime Minister. Now, quite a lot of the letter gets into legal arguments around stopping the votes, the European Convention on Human Rights. We're not going to read all of it. We'll have some sections. I should say it starts by saying that after the phone call yesterday, I found that disappointing. It says this is at the core of this, with this claim from Suella Braverman that she drew up this document just over a year ago when she agreed to go back into government, that it was handed over, she claims, to Rishi Sunak, setting out these things that she felt were essential, and in her view, the Prime Minister has gone back on. I should say I have tried to speak to Downing Street to get their response to all of this.
because they are not yet responding. I should also say I have asked if I can see this document to which she refers, and I was told not for today, which gives you some sense of the story arc, if you like, that those around Suella Braverman anticipate here. In other words, to get to the crux of your question a moment ago, Evan, that there is this letter today, there is this judgment coming tomorrow from the Supreme Court, and then there is the prospect of Suella Braverman and those around her and those loyal to her saying more. In other words, this isn't a resignation letter that sees her disappear off into obscurity. It is the start, it would appear, of her saying rather a lot.
Yeah, I mean, look, I suppose an important question, Chris, is what is your sense of how many troops she has behind her? You have this new Conservative group who had a meeting last night. It wasn't exactly massive. We're talking a dozen or two, but is this a civil war that is about to be unleashed by Suella Braverman in this letter, or is this going to be something much less than that?
That is the key question, and I think it's quite hard to judge at this stage. So there are those who are loyal to her who are quite excitable and have been making it clear to me for the last 24 hours that how she would respond to being sacked would not be purely about how she might position herself for the future, the other side of a general election with the Conservatives to lose, but would instead be about saying some very candid things that would pose some very awkward questions for the Prime Minister right now. Now, those who are loyal to Rishi Sunak are very aware of Suella Braverman and those who support her, and were very much keeping an eye on the numbers that turned up at that meeting last night, and they weren't particularly significant. And I think the crucial thing here, Evan, is there real anger? Yes. Has Rishi Sunak's managed in the last year to be something of a fire blanket against a lot of that anger, certainly spilling out publicly? Yes, he has. But how does that measure up against the world weariness for insurrection within the Conservative Party, given the last couple of years that they have had, and how a further bout of very public tussle and disagreement?
Well handled, no regret. 100%. As my dad was saying, I don't remember being told. It's always been a fact in my life. Like, honestly, they did it perfectly. If they told us later, it may have given us like identity crisis or maybe making us resent our parents because being lied to. So I very much appreciate people consistently as well.
Jamie there, and his father. No, it's 7 minutes to 6. Suella Braverman is making history. She is someone with what is often called populist. Her whereabouts, her events is a big political story this week. But somewhere in Australia, another politician with that populist appeal, Nigel Farage, is making a story. He's starring in the new series of I'm the Celebrity. Get the answer to it. Starts on ITV on Sunday, but how much? Well, I'll see you in the jungle. And this is video. He's doing it for the money. Is he doing it for the money or for some bigger political goal? Michael Crick is a journalist, author who wrote a biography.
江出門
Disrupted life of Nigel Farage. Michael, what's he doing in the jungle?
Well, it's partly for the money. He always, I think, rather resents the fact that because he stopped working in the city so young in order to go into politics, he never made the many millions that many of his colleagues from his city commodity trading days made. But also, he loves the life. I mean, Nigel Farage, I'm sure he gets his raw symptoms if he goes more than 24 hours without appearing on television or radio. And certainly he's going to get more coverage, I think, with this ITV series than anything he's done. Certainly, even more than his evening shows on TV News. And, but also, I think, Nigel Farage is about being confident about what his life. Embarking new books. I mean, for 3 years now, I've been saying, that's it, Farage is not going back to politics. And yet, we then had the Conservative Conference, where he was only there officially as a broadcaster, but he ended up as a darling of many of the Conservative delegates. may even make a chance to go this time and get elected to Parliament as a Conservative MP. And I suppose this is, it could be part of that. I mean, Farage is, I don't think, has any difficulty persuading the public that he is, he's an ordinary bloke who goes up and down the path. I think a lot of politicians have a difficulty persuading the public they are ordinary people with ordinary needs or enjoy their capital. Farage doesn't have that difficulty. Nothing is that. Not but the first process is he said that there's a sizable part of the Conservative membership. And when we saw that party, so that's down to so just run this party. What is it power for the Conservative Party? Well, already got there at the start of the next election. What do the party get in a by-election or do you have to wait for the election after that? The party's made it so look, the party said that is that. Even considered that welcoming into the party. So I don't think you can have a difficulty after the election joining the party, unless the party was to change its mind or to change its leadership in a very radical way. And he should be allowed to keep on the Conservative Party in his view. He even tried a mock become a Conservative MP while he was a MP in European Parliament. Once he was a member, he would then, after the election, he could then apply for any by-elections that came up. I wouldn't be surprised if that late government gets unpopular in a year or two, but it might be easier for the Conservatives to do by-elections. They might have to wait until the subsequent general election. Most of us who join the party have been elected Conservative MP to see how easily he could make those steps. The difficulty then is becoming elected Conservative leader because you need a substantial chunk, basically more than a third of the Conservative MP support that ballot in order to get on the voting on the ballot paper. Like the members, I think, probably quite well voted.
Doors have been slammed in your face, you're not welcome here. Drive-by killings, gang wars, notorious Nazis. People turning on each other on the behaviour. This is Gangster, the story of the Burger Bar Boys. Listen first on BBC Sounds.
And listen now to some weather from Sarah Lucas. Sarah.
Thanks, Evan. Well, it's been another soppy day for many of us. We've got a slightly drier window of weather for the next 24 hours, especially in the south. So let's look at all of southern England, Wales, the Midlands, and East. For the rest of this evening and tonight, it's looking predominantly dry. One or two showers towards the west, but enough of a breeze to keep you frost-free tonight. So temperatures down to between 6 to 8 degrees. For northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, though it's staying cloudy and pretty damp here, so on and off outbreaks of rain really throughout the UK tonight. Most places frost-free down to around 4 to 6 degrees, but far north of mainland Scotland and the Northern Isles will be clear and cold with frost. Now tomorrow, generally fewer showers and windy for these days, but a real breeze zone split. So tomorrow, central and southern England and Wales, most of the Northern Ireland, mostly dry with sunny spells, just a few showers in the west, highs of 9 to 12. England and for Scotland and Northern Ireland firstly, it's looking at cloudy outbreaks of rain and top temperatures around about 8 to 10. Colder and clearer, just 5 to 7 degrees sunshine tomorrow, just the fun of Scotland.
Thanks, Sarah. Some of you are putting your hands in. Johnny Baker, studio director, says,
Hello， 你等我哋啊嘛，會去到邊？ 過咗橋，因為佢叫我去 Market Lane 嗰度，唔係周圍過橋 Market Lane 嗰度。佢叫我啱啱過橋，跟住我你個 account 咧俾哥哥睇咗而家嘅 Marvel 之前睇嗰啲10分鐘應該睇。喺你個YouTube 嗰度啊，喺你個 history 嗰度應該睇到。你唔使睇咗，跟住先知道發生咩事。6點喎。
McDonald's UK says the company has fired 18 people. BBC exposed accusations of sexual assault and harassment at the chain. Health officials recommend chickenpox vaccinations for all children in Newcastle. Suella Braverman has launched a blistering attack on the Prime Minister day after he sacked her as Home Secretary. Braverman said Rishi Sunak had no good intention of doing this. He was stop the channel. The Prime Minister was proud his government had brought forward tough legislation to tackle illegal migration as the country has seen, and the former Home Secretary for Health Service. Report from our political correspondent Damien Carrasco. Suella Braverman's letter is stinging in its criticism. She questions Rishi Sunak's legitimacy as party leader, saying he had been rejected by a majority of Conservative Party members during the leadership contest and that had no personal mandate. Says her support was a pivotal factor in his becoming Prime Minister. She backed him because he agreed to support certain key policies. One of those was stopping the boats. Tomorrow, the Supreme Court will rule on the legality of the plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda. Ms. Braverman says she urged Mrs. Sunak to leave the European Convention on Human Rights to make it easier to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda.
Your rejection of this path is not merely a betrayal of our agreement, but a betrayal of your promise to the nation that you would do whatever it takes to stop the boat.
And she's just as critical of what she saw as Mr. Sunak's failure to heed her call for legislation to make it easier to ban marches such as the one in London at the weekend.
Britain is at a turning point in our history and faces a threat of radicalisation and extremism in ways not seen for 20 years. I regret to say that your response has been uncertain, weak, and lacking in the qualities of leadership that this country needs.
In summary, she says his approach is failing.
Someone needs to be honest. Your plan is not working. We have endured record election defeats, and your research has failed, and we are running out of time. You need to change course urgently.
A small group of Conservative MPs unhappy with the reshuffle that saw the sacking of Ms. Braverman published an open letter today. Said they supported Mr. Sunak, worried that the party was abandoning those new voters who backed it in 2019. Kate said Suella Braverman had been speaking up for those voters.
If you look at what our voters were looking for, especially our new voters, they do want a robust approach to immigration, and by and large, most of our voters did actually want those protests back. And she was speaking up for that agenda. Now again, it's not about her individually, but we've got to ask, is the new cabinet going to speak up for those concerns of very ordinary people?
Responding to her letter, Downing Street said the government had brought forward the toughest legislation to tackle illegal migration this country has seen and has subsequently reduced the number of boat crossings by a third this year. Adding, whatever the outcome of the Supreme Court tomorrow, Rishi Sunak will continue that work. Morrison's statement concluded. The Prime Minister thanks the former Home Secretary for her service. Labour's Shadow Secretary of State for International Development, Lisa Nandy, said Suella Braverman's letter was the latest instalment in the Tory psychodrama that's been playing out over the last 13 years, holding the rest of the country to ransom while the Tories fight among themselves. She added, it just shows that this is a Tory government that is out of ideas, out of energy, and hopefully out of tongue.
With his assessment of the latest development and language, here's our political editor, Chris Mason.
This letter is incendiary. Incendiary because it is a direct, unflinching assault, not just on the Prime Minister's political capabilities, or lack of them as she claims, but on his integrity. Her language drips with derision, betrayal, equivocation, disregard, wishful thinking, uncertain, weak. She claims to have presented Rishi Sunak with a document outlining her conditions to serve as his Home Secretary. Those closest, however, claim that Rishi Sunak read and interpreted the document the letter refers to, because he took a copy and there were witnesses. Tonight, I've asked to see that document and was told it was not today. That suggests that it comes to drifting and division fatigue. In an attempt to maximise damage, it might cause the government. Downing Street responds to Mrs. Rafferty's letter hints at a frostiness, to put it gently. The Prime Minister believes in actions, not words, the spokesman noted actively. It is to those actions, or lack of them, that attention turns here tomorrow, with the Supreme Court's decision on the government's plan to send some migrants to Rwanda. Expect to hear more from Mrs. Braverman after we've heard from the lawyers.
To sit at a table with the Iranian government, or the Israeli government to sit at a table with the Iranian government, it is actually the clever thing to do to widen the circle, to make it as wide as possible. I think President Eisenhower was correct. But it takes a lot of political courage, and in the United States we're very closely divided, and we're coming up on elections. And the issue of Iran is something that the Republicans use as a weapon against President Biden. So it will be difficult. I don't know whether it's not like we have large potatoes to the Iranians, but we should include all those Gulf states that were eager to do business with Israel, as many of the other panelists mentioned, without much consideration of the Palestinians. And frankly, also the Israeli government, it's a ticking time. Time is not on messing up the side. He frankly needs to step aside now. I do think the shock to the Israeli people, on the one hand, it makes everything existential, and it makes them, on the one hand, less likely to look for new solutions, including a one-state solution. On the other hand, the fact that it's existential, the fact that nothing else has worked, maybe might lead a new Israeli government to consider something else. It's possible. I don't think the United States, though, is going to force any new Israeli government, or this one, necessarily to move away from a two-state solution. And again, I think for the Israeli people it's very difficult. There are many states that are Muslim states and Arab states, and for the Israeli people this is the only state that is a Jewish state, and we're a long way from, I think, the Israeli people accepting a one-state solution.
Ethan Farkas, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence, thank you very much for joining us from Washington. Just a reminder, you are just tuning in. This is Today Debate, looking at what happens when between Israel and Gaza ends. Peter Ricketts, you were talking about that idea of enlarging into British leadership. Where is British leadership in the opposition today?
There hasn't been much British leadership. I think we and other countries are in a way complicit with Netanyahu's approach of trying to airbrush out the Palestinian problem for the last decade or so. As has been said, it wasn't powerful in the report. There's been no British initiative in this area for a long time. But
Americans are really the power here. Is there a scope?
Americans are power, Britain can do some thought leadership. And I think the idea of using these terrible events, knowing it to the victims, to make every effort to ensure this doesn't happen again to the next generation, that's a pretty powerful tool. I do think that we are losing in the global south because we seem to be critical and asking for support and praying when we appear to be supporting what Israel is doing in Gaza, and for geopolitical reasons to then pushing ahead. I like the idea of involvement. For example, the Saudis now have a close relationship with Iran in a wider regional settlement. We can only help Gaza if there's a massive international coalition, but that has to come with the Israelis enabling it to happen, and the Israelis have to do something with them. So mobilization and a large coalition to deal with the Gaza problem, as well as try and calm regional tensions, seems to me to be worth pushing for.
Speaking of leadership, rather calmly, what about the Palestinian leadership of the future? You've got Mahmoud Abbas, who doesn't even speak for all Palestinians, and has been in office without there being an election for a very long time, largely because he would fear Hamas winning it.
Yeah, the question of Palestinian leadership has been very disabling for the Palestinian movement. There's no question about it. And not least, by the way, the responsibility for there being no leadership must be borne upon by Israel, which has made sure that it has assassinated all or most the Palestinian leaders who could have taken over. And I remember that one man in particular, that's Marwan al-Houthi, has been imprisoned by the Israelis, and they will never let him out. This is a man who potentially could lead the Palestinians and
But he's accused of very serious crimes. He's accused of very serious crimes, that's why he's in jail.
Well, the point is he's out of action, and this is exactly what Israel defines. So we're not well served by the fact that we find leadership was very, very difficult indeed. But I just wanted to sort of go back a little bit on some of the points that have come out. One of the things I really hoped, in a very unrealistic way, I really hoped would come out of the dreadful destruction of Gaza would be that there would be a rethink on the part of world leaders about what's really going on. Not in terms of a repetition again of the formulas of the past where you get Saudi Arabia and some other Gulf states and the moderate, so-called moderate states, and they get together and they talk about the Palestinians and they offer the Palestinians a song of some kind. If only they would see a moment now when some very hard questions have to be asked. What is Israel really about? What is this state doing in the heart of the Arab world? It has intentions which, as far as we can see, are absolutely antithetical to peace or justice, and certainly, as far as the Palestinians are concerned, they have seen nothing but damage and danger from Israel. So hasn't the time come to actually ask the question of all those states that support Israel and what it's doing now? Isn't this the time to ask what do we support? What is the nature of this state that can do that? Now, my answer had been, I've tried to explain, the trajectory leads us to a point in which there is no state of Israel, as distinct, by the way, from Jewish Israeli communities. I'm talking about the state structure of Israel, which has done untold damage in the Middle East. What do you call those? Israel, or what do you call it? Palestine. I think it should be Palestine, because Palestine, well, I explained, Palestine is the name of the country.
Rather, let's be realistic, it's not, the state of Israel is not going to be disbanded, it's not going to lose its name and morph into something else.
No, I think I have to explain myself very well. I try and do that. I am not talking about, remember, we are not talking about the people who live currently in what is called Israel. What I am talking about is the state of Israel, which has done a lot of damage, I repeat, to the Palestinians and actually Egypt. Now, in the one state that I am talking about, what I call it Palestine is very simple because Palestine is a very, very ancient name for that land. 5,000 years old. Israel is 75 years old. So it just makes sense. But leave that aside, that's not the issue. The issue is that we need a solution that ends this terrible tragedy. And dying in their houses at the moment in Gaza. These people have finally the right to enjoy a homeland.
Okay,
At the same time,
we only have a few minutes left, so I want to bring everyone
forgive
else
me,
in
just
before
very
we
quickly.
come.
At the same time, the Israeli Jewish community should not suffer. It will be living with us, and we will be living with them as equal citizens in one democratic state. What is wrong with that?
Daniel, in 5 years' time, where do you think we will be? I'm conscious that in the months before this, the many months, we saw so many young Israelis and Israelis of other ages out on the streets, demanding that the government act in a different way. Where does that movement go after this?
Well, hopefully